Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of Dose of Drew and another edition of Friday Night Knives. And tonight on Friday Nights, we have the Kizer Mystic. For those of you who don't know, it's another Munko Knives design. We've had a few of these on the channel. Most of them pretty good. And this is not only, it's kind of special in that it is a Rex 45 blade. Number one, my first Rex 45 blade. If you're looking at Hitachi's HAP 40, there's a lot of things. This is a high-speed tool steel. I have yet to see it. I've heard some people talk about it being stainless. As far as I know, Rex 45 is not stainless. It is a full-on tool steel. But let's get into the rest of the bits here. Mostly because, look, this is quite the large knife. So let's get into some of that. Before I get talking about it, let's get back into the relative things here. Here is the Mystic next to the Paramilitary 2. As you can see, pretty significant in its size. A lot of the same hand space as the Paramilitary 2 with more edge. And of course, the Para 3, lightweight in this case. Again, similar hand space. Tons more edge. It's definitely in the larger size of knives here, which is not a bad thing per se. And why do I feel like I lost my... I seem to have misplaced my tape measure. So we'll just have to live with it as it is. We'll go with that. I don't know where it was. It's normally right here. I didn't prep properly before the video, so here we go. This is it next to the Kershaw Blur, and of course, not just any leak, but a random leak. And you guys can see, it's bigger than just a blur, though. Similar, very similar in edge length. If you can see that, very similar in edge length, which the blur is a lot of edge for the handle size. And of course, we have pretty significant handle area, which the blur does very well also. So very, very cool on that one. I do want, since it is a larger size, I am going to throw one other gap in here. This is the Rat 1, the Model 1 and D2, and of course the R2D2, the Rat 2 and D2. So as you can see, it's pretty big even on like the Rat 2 size. Or the Rat 1 size, sorry. The Rat 1 is not a small knife, and this is pretty significantly large also. So there is that, which isn't so bad. But let's get back into the rest of them. There it is next to the Benchmade Bug Out and the Civivi Elementum. As you can see, a full-size knife in the general sense. I'll keep coming back to that. And of course, here it is next to my Wiener. Whatever, it's big, okay? My Wiener is just perfectly fine sized, okay? It has a little bit, it has some nice angles to it. What do you want me to say? It's bigger than my Wiener, okay? That's bigger than my Wiener. I don't know what else to say besides that. I'm gonna do a couple of other measurements here while we're at it. Zeroed in. All right. Blade stock, 0.115, a little under 3 millimeters. We're going to go behind the edge. It's actually somewhat... thin behind the edge. 0.17 thousandths behind the edge, and that is quite literally right behind the edge. If I come back up here, so 18 thousandths, a little bit, somewhere between 17 and 18 thousandths behind the edge. That's pretty thin behind the edge. That's incredibly slicey. Something else we want to throw out there. Weight of this big boy. Over 4 ounces, but considering the size, that's pretty good. That's actually, for how large this knife is, it wears it very well. Balance is just behind the pivot, right at the frame lock part. So it sits very well right near the pivot, which is where your grip is. All right, so let's get into the damn nice categories. Design, aesthetics, mechanics, noteworthy, and damn nicer if there's any requests. Design, aesthetics, mechanics, noteworthy points, intended purpose, cost to value ratio, expectations, and of course, any requests or anything like that if there is any. So let's get it. Fairly unique design. It brings a lot of design elements that I think are really cool. One, like the sort of angular back on there, kind of reminds me of several different knives. As far as that goes, nice little backup, flat frame, incredibly cool looking harpoon blade, a nice angle between the pivot and the between the blade going straight from the pivot to the thing and the pivot to the tip. Sorry, and the pivot to the center of the handle. Very nice angle there. That design is fantastic. There's a little bit of rusticness to the linen micarta on here, which the linen micarta is great for grip. A little bit of roughness to it. Gives it sort of a already used look. You can probably wax that or put some oil on it if you want to fancy it up. Pretty flat scales. Very, very flat. Lots of control surface, and it's still fairly slim. Bring out some of these comparisons again just to throw it out there. It is a little bit, I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can get something back here. So it is about as thin as a paramilitary 2 without the clip. Lots of goodness there. Right, it's not as thin as some of the others, but it's definitely got some thinness to the overall. This nice little titanium backspacer rubbed over, hidden lanyard point at the very, very back. Perfect place for it, does not overdo anything. It's not a fully deep carry knife, but there's that much sticking up, which gives you just enough to put your finger on and pull. Beautifully done. Not reversible, right-handers only. But this bolster lock thing on the frame lock is pretty cool. And the aesthetics of that design, hard to complain about. Between the ergonomics in the saber grip, which are fantastic, the pinch grip, which puts that stud right at the pinch and your finger just kind of rolls. You don't want to be too rough from here because you can easily ride your finger up on the edge. And of course, the over-the-top finger where you want to get some very, very detailed work, it is perfect. If you want to get choked up and do some detail, I wouldn't suggest doing it real heavy because you can slide pretty easy onto the sharpened edge. But you can get some very detailed work, and of course, anything scoring or anything like that, you have your finger down the blade. The harpoon section fits wonderfully and gives you a nice angle down to the tip. Very easy to tell what you're doing. And that's the mechanics of the action. I mean, my goodness, this is, right, the front flipper, very nice. It's almost a guillotine. The weight of that blade does come down, but if you keep your thumb in the right spot, it just hits it. And then it slides. Very smooth action. I don't know if, I didn't call it out, but I don't know if you could tell. That's a micarta pivot ring that matches the micarta there. Very, very cool. Nice domed screws instead of flat. Gives you a little bit of texture to go in there. Also gives it a little bit of visual texture. It really kind of brings out the dome while the pivot ring hits the background. Very, very cool. Right? Noteworthy points on this one. It's a Rex 45 blade. This thing is going to be relatively tough with pretty good edge retention. Not much corrosion resistance to say, but one of the things I'm thinking about is doing an oxidation on this, giving it that tool gray where it'll kind of match the titanium. If you want that video, by all means, say something down in the comments for we can do a video where we oxidize the blade and maybe even do some things with scales, as I have some scales that I would like to dye that I haven't yet. So there's some videos in there. Throw it down in the comments if you want to see it. And this is an incredibly versatile design. If you're not new to the knife world, you'll probably recognize it. If you're relatively new, there's some visual cues on this knife that can really go towards how it fits in the hand and everything on that. I'll let you figure that out, but there's plenty of them that do. The saber grip and all that. If there's one thing about the ergonomics, I would say it's, see how deep that blade is in there? There's lots of space. This could have been sort of dished out a little bit or made straight and then down. Given just a little bit of room, so when you're coming back, you have a more stable place for that last finger to sit in the saber grip. Is it nitpicky? Yeah, absolutely nitpicky, because honestly, my hand fits just like it does in the Paramilitary 2 right in there. It fits really tight, and that's a pretty low profile little beak right there with a lot of with a little bit of contouring to go with it. So that's pretty good. Comfort. It's titanium frame lock, Kizer to get Munko knives. There's lots of noteworthy points. But for something that's so aesthetically cool, it looks good, right? It looks like a knife. It looks really cool. Every single piece of the aesthetics also has a function. And for me, that is beautiful. Where the function and the form come together to not only look cool but perform better, that's an ideal situation. This knife has it in spades. I think the intended purpose on this is some hard use, quite possibly some decent hard use knife stuff. For a folding knife, this is crazy. We'll get to more of that in a way. But the steel, great edge retention, decent toughness, not much corrosion resistance. Get a little bit of patina or oxidation on there, it'll go for a long while. And to be that full-size knife for a lot of people, it's unique enough to bring it in. It has an incredible design. It's a really decent, just a really decent freaking design. For lack of a better, quick answer on there, it's an incredible design. Let me make sure I'm getting all of the... all of the right stuff here. Yeah, so this has nearly 6% tungsten, 3% vanadium, around 6% tungsten, 3% vanadium, 5% molybdenum, 8% cobalt. This is all by weight, and around 4% chromium. So definitely not a stainless steel. It's very well hardening, lots of tungsten, vanadium, and moly. No, not a lot of chromium to bring those vanadium carbides into the chromium. So it's going to have a lot of carbide as well as pretty good toughness. KnifeSteelNerds.com has a lot of toughness stuff. I'm not going to go in there. HAP 40, Rex 45, basically the same thing. Really good steel, very well known for being a decent knife steel. While it does have a lot of cobalt, which is going to do some things for hardness. Usually these things are hardened. Rex 45 is hardened in the 62 to 64 area. Like M4, Magnum Custom. It takes a high hardness while maintaining good toughness. That's important. Right, as it's not a cheap steel. It's not the most expensive, but it's definitely not cheap. And when it comes to the cost to value ratio, it's one of those things. This is not an inexpensive knife. It is not a cheap knife. It has sublime action. Right. And while it's around the $200 mark, it's a little bit below that. You can find it on sales for, I believe, around the $160 mark. But I think its general, at the time of this recording, its general price is going to be the $180 to $200 range. I found this on a flash sale, basically, that got it a little cheaper, but I believe that is the normal price. So it's high. Titanium, linen micarta, Rex 45, bearings, very, very tight tolerances. Look at that. Look at the fit on that. The fit and finish is right up there. This is intended to look distressed and old. Everywhere you go, the edges are smooth. They match up perfectly. It's not impossible, but can be even hard to get a fingernail in some areas. Very well done. Comes in essentially the one color scheme, which isn't necessarily bad. It's a good value. It's not inexpensive, but you get a lot for the money. So it's still a pretty good value. I expected this to be good. I'm a fan of the Munko knives designs. I have a few of them. And Kizer has been killing it with the quality lately, and this is no exception. This is high quality. You want to know the biggest nitpicks? The gap right there. You can see it. Right? You can see the gap between the titanium and the micarta. It's a nice even gap. This side has almost no gap. It just has a little bit of a lift. Right? So that gap is almost non-existent. That gap is visible as a line of color. Is that nitpicky? Abso-freaking-lutely. You can see slight changes in the variation of the tolerance around the pivot ring, right? It's visible enough that you know there's probably 1/10 of a millimeter or something like that in there. Maybe 1/10 back and forth, right? So you've got maybe 2/10 or a quarter of a millimeter in between. So what? It's not a $400 or $500 knife, and at $200, that is a perfectly acceptable level of fit and finish. That is, on a production knife, absolutely acceptable. And I don't feel like there's any sort of loss. There's the tiniest amount of stuff. You feel the difference in texture more than the actual line. Is this nitpicky? I want to talk about the value and expectations. I expected it to be good. It's better than I expected. Not by a huge amount, but the fit and finish is right where I expected Kizer to be. They've been killing it. This is no exception. I expected this level from Kizer because they've shown it recently, and this is no exception. What I didn't expect is the quality of the design. Like I said, I like Munko knives. This thing is an incredible user knife. Yeah, it looks cool. It really does. But its user capabilities are even better. The steel is tough. It has a good edge. The design is everything you need a regular user knife to be. It's large enough to do big tasks, designed well enough and ergonomic enough for small tasks and to be precise. And man, it delivers. If there's a request, and this is going to be an unusual thing, I'm all right with the Lineman card. I wouldn't mind some colors, right? Some different colors on this one. May have been hard to get it out. This may have been expensive, but some colors would have been nice. Contouring on the handle, bringing this down more than just like that, but rolling, especially on the back end here, rolling that micarta over to some amount of contouring would have been fantastic. It's not as bad as, say, a Paramilitary 2, right, where this thing is essentially just a brick on the handle, so it's not quite as square as that, but a little more contouring instead of just this little bit of beveling would be nice. The other thing, this little beak, as I mentioned before, could be sort of taken down and turned into a flat spot or something that's more distinct as a platform for a finger. Slightly larger hands may have a hard time with this last bit where they'll want their pinky to go. And it's not that the rounded part isn't bad. You can absolutely do that, and it gives you a little traction. Just having a spot that makes it feel more like it's for your finger rather than just kind of an afterthought would be really, really nice on this one. All right. The other thing is, this would make an incredible small EDC fixed blade. Get this part so you don't have to worry about choking back or anything like that. Keep the choil in there and turn this into an EDC fixed blade where you can have a nice spot for the pinch, where you can get that contouring. Expand it just a little bit where you don't have to worry about the pivot, so you have a little more hand space. Excuse me. This would make a fantastic EDC fixed blade. Absolutely incredible EDC fixed blade. I think that is probably the biggest. The contouring would be nice. There's a couple things. It all fits my fingers. I think that would be better for the general population. The contouring would be more my decision. But really, this would make an incredible fixed blade. I just want to put something out there. Guys, take a look. Like, how cool of a fixed blade would this make? You could have a slightly higher grind. You could have the same steel for all I care. Put it in 10V. This would make an incredible fixed blade EDC knife. That would probably be the other big request is a fixed blade version of this, because this would do incredibly well, I think. This knife has been hard to get. It sells out pretty quickly, and it's a really, really, really nice design. I'm going to give it a 90 out of 100 on the design points here, or on all the points. The design is incredible. The aesthetics are great. The mechanics are fantastic. Noteworthy points are up there. The cost to value ratio, not super high, but not super low. You get a lot for the money. It lives up to expectations, may even exceed some. And all of the requests are nitpicky stuff that might make it better to some small degree. This is an outstanding knife. I mean, it really is a package piercer, a shrink wrap slicer, a cardboard carver, and an envelope eviscerator extraordinaire. That backwards grip, as well as sort of the chest lever grip, makes this also a fantastic little bit on there. So it does all of those things quite well. So it's really hard to fit. It's a little heavy, but it's also fairly large. For its size, it's not. It's almost a lightweight knife for its size, especially with all of the titanium and whatnot. There's not much milling on the inside for weight reduction, but that's because the titanium is also incredibly thin right there in order to deal with the bolster. So that's pretty cool. There could be some up front. Yeah, maybe. Just overall, all around, incredibly good. Again, 90 out of 100. It's a solid 90, if not a little higher. And that's where I'm going to leave it with the Kizer Mystic. The Munko knives and Rex 45, absolutely outstanding knives. Some of these big knives are really, really hitting home runs here, and this one is no exception. So if you haven't already looked at this knife and are looking at it, man, get off the couch, get off the bench. If you're saving up, you're like, I don't know about this one, it's worth it. This is an incredible user knife with lots of great qualities. If you're like, I can't have the stainless, well, there's not much you can do about the Rex 45. I mean, there's definitely things that could be deal breakers for some people, but it definitely isn't the quality or the design. It's going to be more about circumstance than anything else. And that makes this a great knife. Could it use a little jimping on there? Yeah, maybe, but it's really hard to even complain because it's the one spot you can do it, and it just does it so well. I could go on, but I won't. This is a great knife. If you have a chance, buy it. In the meantime, go ahead, take this video, watch it twice. Comment as much as you like. Be mindful of side effects. Remember to like and subscribe. This has been your Dose of Drew. I am said Drew, and you guys have a great rest of your night.